The chandelier above the dining table cast sharp shadows across their faces as they dissected my life choices like surgeons over a failed experiment. I kept my fork steady, cutting through the overcooked roast beef, while my fiancé Marcus sat beside me, nodding along to every criticism his mother leveled at my existence. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. So you're still doing that little tutoring thing? Patricia Westbrook's voice dripped with practiced condescension as she refilled her wineglass. The diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist caught the light. Cubic zirconia, I'd noticed earlier, though she wore it like it was from Tiffany's. Yes, I replied evenly. I tutor students in mathematics and computer science. How quaint! She exchanged a knowing look with her husband Richard, who sat at the head of their mahogany table like a discount store king. Marcus was just telling us you work from that tiny apartment of yours. No office or anything official. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. 3 months of engagement and he still hadn't found his spine. It's efficient, I said, taking a sip of water. I'd learned early in the evening not to touch the wine, a cheap blend they'd poured into expensive-looking decanters, another layer of their carefully constructed facade. Efficient, Patricia repeated, testing the word like it tasted sour. Darling, when Marcus and I were your age, I was already running the household while Richard built his business. Real ambition, you understand. Not this gig economy nonsense. The business she referenced was a failing car dealership that Richard had inherited from his father, run into the ground over 20 years, and finally sold at a loss 5 years ago. I knew because I'd reviewed every public record, every bankruptcy filing, every desperate loan application. Due diligence wasn't just for business acquisitions. Mother has a point, Elena. Marcus finally spoke, and my hand tightened imperceptibly on my fork. We've talked about this. When we're married, you'll need something more substantial. My wife can't be running a tutoring service out of a studio apartment. 1 bedroom, I corrected softly. Let them think I was defensive about the apartment size. Let them miss the calculation behind my eyes. Whatever it is, Patricia waved her hand dismissively. It's not appropriate for a Westbrook. We have a reputation to maintain in this community. The community being a development of over-leveraged McMansions in the suburbs, where everyone drove leased luxury cars and spent their weekends comparing the square footage of their homes while drowning in debt. I'd analyzed the neighborhood demographics thoroughly when I'd started examining the Westbrook family finances 6 weeks ago. Elena's trying her best, Marcus offered weakly, and somehow that stung more than the outright criticism. The patronizing defense, as if I needed him to validate my meager existence to his parents. Trying isn't good enough. Richard spoke for the first time since we'd sat down, his voice carrying that particular tone of masculine authority that men without real power often adopted. Marcus is on track to make partner at the firm within 5 years. He needs a wife who enhances his prospects, not someone who diminishes them. The firm, Rothman and Associates, a mid-tier accounting company where Marcus worked 60-hour weeks for a salary that barely covered his car payment, student loans, and the lifestyle his parents had convinced him he deserved. I knew his finances too. I knew everything. I understand your concerns, I said, my voice steady and mild, the same tone I'd perfected over years of letting people underestimate me. I want what's best for Marcus too. Then you understand why we're having this conversation. Patricia leaned forward, her expression shifting into what she probably thought was maternal concern. We're not trying to be cruel, dear. We're trying to help you see reality. Marcus deserves someone who matches his ambition, his trajectory. Someone from a better background, Richard added, apparently abandoning all pretense of subtlety. Marcus's ex-girlfriend Vanessa, for instance. Her father owns 3 medical practices. That's the kind of connection that opens doors. Marcus stared at his plate. The engagement ring on my finger, a modest solitaire he'd bought on credit, suddenly felt heavy. I see, I said quietly. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. We're not saying you're not a lovely girl, Patricia continued, warming to her theme now. But love isn't enough in the real world. Marriage is a partnership, an economic alliance. What do you bring to this partnership besides tutoring? I could have told them then. Could have detailed the empire I'd built from my grandmother's small inheritance and my own relentless work. The portfolio of rental properties across 3 states, the investment fund I'd seeded and grown to 8 figures, the technology patent I'd sold to a Fortune 500 company at 24. The web of holding companies and trusts that kept my wealth invisible to casual searching. Instead, I set down my fork with careful precision. You're right. I don't come from money like your family does. The lie sat comfortably on my tongue. The Westbrooks didn't come from money. They came from debt and delusion, from mortgages they couldn't afford and credit cards they'd maxed out maintaining their illusion of success. I'd seen every number, every desperate refinancing, every payment that went in late. Exactly, Patricia said, relief flooding her face. Finally, the poor girl understood her place. We're not trying to be snobs, but you have to understand our position. The Westbrook name means something in this town. It meant a foreclosure notice that would arrive in 47 days if they didn't catch up on their mortgage payments. It meant the second lien they'd taken out last year to pay for Marcus's sister's wedding, the loan with the predatory interest rate they hadn't understood when they'd signed. It meant the carefully hidden bankruptcy that Richard had filed 19 years ago, sealed but not impossible to uncover with the right connections. I do understand, I said. I should probably go. Thank you for dinner. Elena, Marcus started, but his mother cut him off. That's probably for the best. We can continue this conversation when everyone's had time to think clearly. Marcus, why don't you see her out while we clean up? I stood, smoothing my dress, a simple outfit from Target that I'd chosen specifically for this evening. I'd worn my hair in a plain ponytail, minimal makeup, driving the car I kept for occasions when I needed to seem ordinary. Everything calculated to let them feel superior. Marcus walked me to the door in silence. On the porch, under the light that illuminated the peeling paint they couldn't afford to fix, he finally spoke. They mean well. They're just protective. I know, I said, and I did know. They were protecting their meal ticket, their retirement plan, the son they'd groomed to lift them out of the hole they'd dug with their own bad decisions and worse judgment. Maybe we should take a break, Marcus said, not meeting my eyes. Just for a few weeks. Let things cool down. There it was. The coward's exit, letting his parents push me out while he pretended to be the reluctant participant. Maybe we should, I agreed, and the relief on his face would have been comical if it hadn't been so pathetic. I drove away in my Honda Civic, watching the Westbrook house shrink in my rearview mirror. The house with its impressive facade and rotting foundation. Literal and metaphorical. The house I'd already bought, though they didn't know it yet. The next morning, I sat in my real office, not the studio apartment they imagined, but the corner suite in a downtown building I owned, watching the sun rise over the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. My assistant Emma had already prepared the files I'd requested. The mortgage paperwork is all here, she said, laying out the documents. Cascade Holdings acquired the note from First National 3 weeks ago, as planned. The Westbrooks have been notified of the transfer, but wouldn't have paid attention to the details. Cascade Holdings, one of my many corporate entities, this one specifically created to acquire distressed assets. like the Westbrook mortgage, purchased at a discount when First National decided to clean up their books. And the meeting? Scheduled for 2 p.m. at their residence, they think it's a standard meet and greet with their new mortgage holder's representative. Emma smiled slightly. She'd been with me for 5 years and had seen this play before, though never quite this personal. Perfect. And the other items? The documentation on Richard's business dealings is compiled, the timeline of their financial decisions, the analysis of how they've been living beyond their means for the past decade, all ready for your review. I spent the morning in meetings, handling the actual business that funded my life. A real estate acquisition in Portland, a tech startup pitch that showed promise, a conference call with investors in Singapore. The work that people like the Westbrooks couldn't imagine because they were too busy pretending at wealth to understand how it was actually built. At 1:30, I changed in my private bathroom. Gone was the Target dress. I selected a tailored Armani suit in charcoal gray, Louboutin heels, the Cartier watch I'd bought myself when my first company hit 7 figures. I wore my hair down, professional but polished, and applied makeup with the precision of someone who understood the psychology of power dressing. Emma drove me in the Tesla, the car I actually drove, not the Honda prop. We pulled up to the Westbrook house at exactly 2 p.m. I saw the curtain twitch in the front window. Patricia, watching for the mortgage representative. I walked to the door alone, my briefcase in hand, and rang the bell. Patricia answered, her smile ready and plastic. It froze when she recognized me. Elena, what are you doing here? I'm here for our 2 o'clock meeting, Mrs. Westbrook. May I come in? Confusion clouded her face, but breeding won out. The performance of manners even when the mind was racing. I don't understand. We have an appointment with someone from Cascade Holdings. That's correct. I'm the CEO of Cascade Holdings, among other entities. I stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. Is your husband available? And Marcus? This concerns all of you. Richard appeared from the living room, Marcus behind him. I watched understanding dawn slowly, like a sunrise over a disaster. This is some kind of joke, Richard blustered. Not a joke, a business meeting. I walked into their dining room, the same table where they'd carved up my character last night, and set my briefcase down. Please, sit. We have a lot to discuss. Now wait just a minute. Richard started. Sit. Down. The steel in my voice cut through his bluster. This was the voice I used in boardrooms, in negotiations, when I needed people to understand that courtesy was a choice, not a necessity. They sat, all 3 of them, confusion and dawning horror mixing on their faces. I opened my briefcase and removed the first document. This is your mortgage, recently acquired by my company. You're currently 3 payments behind, with a 4th coming due in 11 days. The total arrearage is $47,000, not counting late fees and penalties. Patricia's face went white. How do I have this? I bought it. Cascade Holdings purchased your note along with a portfolio of other distressed assets. It's what I do, among other things. I laid out the next document. This is your second mortgage, the one you took out last year. Another $32,000 in arrears. You've been making interest-only payments when you remember to make any payments at all. This is impossible, Marcus breathed. You're a tutor. You live in a studio. 1-bedroom apartment, I corrected, which I own, along with the building it's in, and 47 other properties across 6 states. The tutoring is something I do because I enjoy it, not because I need the income. I teach gifted students mathematics and computer science because education matters to me, but it's not my career, Marcus. It's my hobby. I removed another file, this one thicker. Let's talk about your family's financial history, shall we? Richard, would you like to explain the bankruptcy you filed in 2006? Or the car dealership you inherited and ran into the ground? Or perhaps the 3 different business ventures you've started and failed in the past decade. Richard's jaw worked, but no sound came out. Mom? Marcus turned to Patricia, looking for an anchor in the storm. And Patricia, your household management is interesting. You've refinanced this house 4 times in 10 years, pulling out equity each time to fund a lifestyle you can't afford. The European vacation last year? Financed. Marcus's sister's wedding? Financed. The furniture in this room, the cars in your driveway, even your jewelry, all bought on credit you can't service. I laid out page after page of their financial disasters, speaking calmly, clinically, the way a surgeon might explain a terminal diagnosis. You've been living on borrowed money and borrowed time, maintaining an image of success while drowning in debt. And last night, you sat at this table and called me unambitious. You questioned what I could bring to a marriage with your son. You suggested I wasn't good enough for the Westbrook name. Marcus found his voice finally. Why didn't you tell me? About any of this? I turned to him. And for the first time, I let some emotion through. Why didn't I tell you? Because I've been down this road before, Marcus. 3 times before, to be exact. Men who loved my money more than they loved me. Men who saw me as a bank account with benefits. So when I met you, I decided to try something different. I hid everything and waited to see who you really were. And who am I? His voice was small. You're exactly like your parents. All facade, no foundation. You earn $63,000 a year, Marcus. You have $112,000 in student loan debt. Your car payment is $850 a month for a BMW you bought to impress people at work. You have $4,200 in credit card debt and maybe $1,500 in savings. You're drowning, just like them, but you were so busy trying to seem successful that you never noticed I was watching you sink. Patricia made a sound like a wounded animal. You can't do this. You can't just come in here and what? Tell you the truth? Foreclose on your house? Because I can do exactly that. The foreclosure paperwork is already prepared. 1 signature and you'll have 60 days to vacate. You're bluffing, Richard said, but his voice shook. I removed another document from my briefcase. This is the foreclosure notice, pre-signed by the judge. We have a good relationship. He handles a lot of my property acquisitions. All I have to do is file it. Silence fell like a guillotine blade. Here's what's going to happen, I said, leaning back in my chair. I'm going to give you a choice. Option 1, I file this paperwork. You lose the house. Your credit, already terrible, becomes catastrophic. Richard, you'll never get another loan, never start another business. Patricia, your social standing in this community you care so much about will evaporate. Everyone will know the Westbrook success story was fiction. I paused, watching them absorb it. Option 2, I restructure your debt. I consolidate your mortgages, negotiate with your creditors, set you up on a payment plan you can actually afford. I help Richard find real work, not more failed entrepreneurial fantasies. I teach you to live within your actual means, not your imagined ones. And in exchange, you sign an agreement never to contact me again. Any of you. Marcus's head snapped up. Elena, we can work this out. Last night was who you are. I cut him off. You sat there while your mother dissected me. You offered weak defenses that somehow made it worse. And then, on your porch, you suggested we take a break, because it was easier than standing up to them. You're 28 years old, Marcus, and you're still letting your parents make your decisions. I love you, he said, and to his credit, he might have meant it. You love who you thought I was, the struggling tutor you could save, who would be grateful for the Westbrook name and the borrowed prosperity you offered. You don't know me at all. I stood, closing my briefcase. You have 48 hours to decide, option 1 or option 2. Emma will be your point of contact. I placed her card on the table. If I don't hear from you by Friday at 5 p.m., the foreclosure proceeds automatically. Wait. Patricia's voice was strangled. You're just going to leave? After humiliating us like this? I turned back, and I let her see the steel beneath the surface, the core that had built everything while she was busy spending money she didn't have. Humiliating you? You spent last evening explaining why I wasn't good enough for your family. You questioned my ambition, my background, my worth. You suggested Marcus's ex-girlfriend was a better match because her father owns medical practices. And all the while, you were 3 payments from losing your house, pretending at a prosperity you haven't had in years. I walked to the door, then paused. I came from nothing, Mrs. Westbrook. Actually nothing, not your performance of middle-class struggle. My mother cleaned houses. My father died when I was 12. My grandmother left me $18,000 when she passed, and I turned it into an empire because I understood something you never learned. Real wealth isn't about looking successful. It's about being successful, quietly, without the performance. You're cruel, Patricia whispered. No, I'm fair. I'm offering you a way out that you don't deserve, because unlike you, I don't kick people when they're down for entertainment. I'm just done being your target. I left them sitting at that table, walked to my car, and drove away. Emma was waiting in the office when I returned. How did it go? About as expected. They'll take option 2. You're sure? They have no choice and they know it. Pride is expensive and they can't afford it anymore. She nodded, already pulling up the restructuring files. And Marcus? I removed my engagement ring, the modest solitaire bought on credit, and dropped it in my desk drawer. Marcus is his parents' son. He'll blame me for this eventually, paint himself as the victim of a con artist. But he'll take the deal. They all will. Do you think he really didn't know about your money? I considered the question. I think he chose not to know. I think he saw the signs, the way I talked about investments, the fact that I never stressed about money, the quality of my thinking, and he chose to ignore them because the narrative of saving the struggling tutor was more comfortable than confronting a woman who didn't need saving. That night, alone in my real apartment, a penthouse with a view of the city lights, I poured myself a glass of actual good scotch and stood at the window. Tomorrow, I'd return to my regular life, the meetings and deals, the quiet building of wealth that people like the Westbrooks would never understand. I didn't regret the evening at their table. Sometimes people need to see consequences. Sometimes the only way to teach respect is to demonstrate the cost of disrespect. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. We need to talk. Please. I deleted it without responding. We'd said everything that needed saying. There would be other Marcuses, other families like the Westbrooks. People who measured worth in performance and missed substance. But I'd learned my lesson. Next time, if there was a next time, I wouldn't hide. I'd find someone who could handle the truth from the start, someone whose ego wasn't threatened by a partner's success. Friday afternoon, Emma called. They signed, all of them, restructuring agreement, non-contact clause, everything. Good. Set them up with a financial counselor, a real one. Make sure they actually learn something from this. You're being generous. I'm being practical. This way they get back on their feet and I get my money. Everybody wins. Except Marcus. Marcus lost what he never really had. That's not loss. That's clarity. I hung up and returned to my real work, the empire that existed whether the Westbrooks acknowledged it or not. They'd go on living in that house, making their payments, rebuilding their lives on a foundation of reality instead of illusion. Maybe they'd learn something. Maybe they wouldn't. but they'd remember every payment they made, every time they looked at their mortgage statement and saw Cascade Holdings. They'd remember the woman they'd called unambitious, the tutor they'd dismissed, the truth they'd been too blind to see sitting across their dinner table. And somewhere in the background of their lives, I'd continue building, growing, succeeding, not for their approval or anyone else's, but because that's what I did. That's who I was, with or without their validation. The Westbrook name meant nothing in this town, but mine, my real name, attached to my real achievements, that meant something. And they'd never even known it was there. Sometimes the best revenge isn't exposure or cruelty. It's simply living well, building high, and letting people discover too late exactly what they dismissed. I picked up my tablet and reviewed the next deal, already moving forward. The past was settled. The future waited. And I'd built that future one careful decision at a time, one smart investment after another, invisible to those who only saw surfaces. Let them learn. Let them grow. Let them remember. But let them do it far from my table, far from my life, far from my empire. I had work to do. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.